We've got it all going on at Liberty Nation on top of this radio show. 5 facts videos which clarify otherwise complicated issues. Our Liberty Nation TV Roundtable, our podcast, The Uprising, all available to you by subscribing to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel. And now we welcome you into the portion of Liberty Nation Radio which we entitle Talkin' Liberty. It is self-explanatory. And on this Thanksgiving week, we welcome in again our regular contributor, LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, and of course, constitutional lawyer, just to burnish his credentials, Scott Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Tim, not only is all that true, I am sitting within eyesight of Independence Hall right now. So happy Thanksgiving to you and everyone else.
Yes, you've gone there simply to be in a patriotic spot for Thanksgiving. I know you have no other connection to Philadelphia. Let's talk about Title IX and the ACLU and their apparent abandonment of the principle of due process on college campuses. Tell us the sad story of what Betsy DeVos, Education Secretary, did and how the nation's oldest civil rights protector reacted to it.
The Obama administration announced on the day that Barack Obama announced his re-election campaign that they would strongly encourage, and by encourage, that's sort of with a wink and a nod. It's almost a requirement, but we can get into the specifics on that in a second. Encourage colleges to basically just sort of one of these women don't lie kind of things. So just take a woman's word for it in any kind of sexual harassment or assault allegation. And so what that meant, Tim, was that the due process protections that we would all expect a college might engage in terms of investigating claims that an accusation perhaps were not true or there was another explanation were cast by the wayside in many different ways. And the chief sufferers among that were men who were either unjustly accused or maliciously falsely accused. What happened was Betsy DeVos and the Department of Education said that colleges are now going to be expected to give due process protections to the people who pay them money to go to school there if they're accused of wrongdoing. It's pure and simple that. There are many components to these due process protections, but that's the long and short of it. And sadly, the ACLU then came out and said that there were now too much due process protections.
Too much due process.
Too much due process, which is
sort of like too much money, Scott. Too much money is
like
the same
money.
as too much.
They say you can't have enough money or RAM, Tim, and and due process. We could add another to that. And really, while Tim, the ACLU has in the past, to be sure, not taken up causes that those of us who support the full spectrum of civil liberties would expect they would, namely firearm rights. They don't actively, come out against those things usually. They just say we're not going to take a position. But to actually say and advocate for less due process,
yes, I
mean that's a real shocking reversal, Tim. And I one Reason magazine writer whose name I wish I could remember now, but can't, said they've now segued from a civil rights organization with a lefty bent to a progressive political organization with a civil rights history. And that's a profoundly sad moment in American history, I think, Tim.
Now, you have a lot more confidence and faith in the mission of the American Civil Liberties Union than I do. I mean, let's face it, over the years, they've been a leftist group that picks and chooses their targets, and almost all of them are in support of leftist causes, though occasionally they'll support, for example, the Nazis' right to march on Skokie, Illinois, just so they can say that they're balanced.
Well,
but come on, Scott. I mean,
they're socialists too, Tim. Always remember that.
It's true. They're both socialists and nationalists. That makes
that's a lie. That's a lie from the left, by the way. They cast them as right wing.
That's right. That's well, that's a whole other conversation. But in any case, you place a lot more stock in the ACLU than I do, to be sure. But let's transition over to election fraud, and not in Georgia and not in Florida, which have gotten all the attention, but actually on Los Angeles's Skid Row. What's this about?
Yeah, there was a number of indictments handed down, charging people with paying these Skid Row, what do you call them, occupants or drifters,
Vagrants is what we used to call them.
a
But you
couple
can't.
of
But you
bucks
can't
or
anymore.
a couple of cigarettes to basically fraudulently sign absentee ballots and things like that. Now, you know, I think it's an important story because anytime votes are stolen, they're stolen from those people who actually did vote. In other words, the power of the vote, right? And I think that unfortunately, the mainstream media is very focused on quote unquote voter suppression or intimidation efforts is what we hear about, but we don't hear about these other types of things that happen, I think, very often, Tim, in large cities that have lockstep one party control. Now, they don't use the word Democrat in the story, which I think is how we can tell it's about a Democrat.
Exactly. Exactly.
If there's a dog catcher in Skokie, Illinois that behaved inappropriately, who's a Republican, they're going to announce Republican behaves inappropriately. But if there's a major city mayor who does something bad and he's a Democrat, we just hear city mayor does something
or
bad.
Or sometimes they'll say who claims to be a Democrat,
right.
So that he's not really one of us. But
I think there's a lot of this kind of thing that goes on, and you think about what's likely to yield more of it, Tim. In California, Los Angeles is a Democrat city, and it's in a Democrat state. So the impetus to actually thoroughly investigate these things and really drill down, I think, is not there. And I think it's a real problem in places that have, and I'm sure, by the way, there's plenty of places that are deep red Republican that have these issues as well. And all the more reason, Tim, why single party control of a place is no bueno.
Well, lest you think that all the developments regarding liberty are negative or gloomy, we turn to Alaska and a court banning the search of gun cases during traffic stops. This is a victory for liberty, no doubt.
Tim, if this was a state court decision, so it doesn't have national precedence. However, other courts can and often do look to how state courts go through the reasoning for their decisions. Why, if you're a judge, you want to, why do the heavy lifting, right? If some judge in Alaska already did a good job for you, you go play golf, right? So it may have impact down the line. And I think it's very important, Tim, because as firearm ownership and carrying of firearms increases in this country in popularity as it has, firearm owners are harassed on an ongoing basis in this country by anti-police departments and anti-police cops who basically, if they're told that there's a gun in the car or a gun on a person, then basically use that as a cause to sort of hold that person up or molest them for another X number of minutes on the basis of the gun. And what the court said here, Tim, is gun carrying is a legal and common activity. And absent some other reason to secure the weapon or to inspect it or something else, you can't do so. And in fact, what we had here was a guy who was carrying a gun in a case, and the police officer looked inside the case, and the court said, if you want to look inside that case, you need a search warrant. And I think that's the appropriate decision, and one, if it was carried forth in all 50 states, would be a massive, massive gain in the rights to not be harassed by the police of all gun owners. But in any case, it is for Alaska right now.
Well, a small victory for liberty is a victory nonetheless. And with that, we move to, one of your home states, which you tend to renounce when appropriate and then and then proclaim as your home state when it is right, profitable for you. The New Jersey Supreme Court
and I disavow it in this instance. Let me say that.
Okay. That's why I set you up with that.
Thank you.
New Jersey Supreme Court reopening thousands of DUI cases after breathalyzer miscalibrations are uncovered.
If I twist my gaze from Independence Mall, Tim, I can actually see the lovely state of New Jersey.
Well, you sound like Sarah Palin saying she can see right. see Russia from Alaska.
Yes, well, in many ways they are akin, and in this way as well. We've talked, I think, before, Tim, on the program about the DUI exception to the Bill of Rights. Sadly, in this country, so many states have done so much to make it easy for the states to convict people for DUIs because of the cash cow that it is. In New Jersey, for instance, there was this breathalyzer, and it had required some fairly sophisticated methods in order to accurize it, and verify it. And it was just beyond the officer who was in charge of it, so he just falsified it. And now we're looking at, Tim, over 20,000 cases of drunk driving convictions that are susceptible to being overturned because of this decision. And as a matter of fact, if you think of each conviction, that could be roughly $10,000 to $15,000 all in terms of the lawyers and the penalties and potential jail and everything else. It is a massive imposition and an illegal imposition on the civil rights of New Jerseyans and those traveling through. So it's good that they found this out and that they're going to get through it all. But the better thing would have been to start with sound science in the first place, rather than this voodoo black boxes that drivers in New Jersey and so many other places are subject to for DUIs.
Do we have any evidence that any individual breathalyzer tests were in fact inaccurate? That in fact they were not the people were not legally drunk but were ruled so, or is this just a systemic failure that has to just toss out all the results?
Well, all of the results from this machine, because what happens is if it's not calibrated correctly, there's no way to tell. That's the point of it, is it has to be calibrated correctly. It's not a blunt object. It's a finely tuned instrument, and it has to be treated as such if you're going to use it to steal people's liberty and their money.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Tim.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio and LibertyNation.com's own podcast, The Uprising, hosted by Scott and me and Lisa K. Donner, are available to you on demand at LibertyNation.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are growing exponentially on YouTube. So this is Tim Donner saying stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.